Hi, Ross Pluskin here from the Top Shelf Aquatics farm. Well, I'm here at our retail facility here in our invertebrate system. Today we're going to be doing a follow-up to our last video on cleanup crew, discussing the need and the imperative to both appreciate them and then seek out ones that are sustainably aquacultured. Today we're going to be taking a step back, more generally, into cleanup crew and dividing them into more useful categories into the specific ecological niches they form in our tanks, the functions they form in our tanks, and how they can be specifically applied to aid in the overall balance and circulation and regulation of resources in the tank and the elimination of pest, algae, uneaten feeds, and other problems that keep the tank from being aesthetically perfect and, at the end of the day, what we want. So we'll be going over 5 different categories of cleanup crew in this episode. The first being what I call the pickers. So the pickers are your hermit crabs of various persuasions, Halloween hermit crabs, blue legs, red legs, scarlets, all these hermit crabs, and also peppermint shrimp. Think anything with mainly crustaceans that have tiny little claws and the like. And the pickers, their job predominantly is going to be removing, they'll be acting as the front line, removing uneaten feed and other big sources of waste in the aquarium. So let's imagine you have a bunch of clownfish swimming around in a new 30-gallon. Clownfish are swimming, you want to keep the clownfish happy, you want to keep the nitrogen cycle going, you're throwing in pellets, you're throwing in other forms of frozen feed. You know, not all of that, no matter how efficiently you're feeding those clownfish, no matter how efficiently those clownfish are scarfing down that food, some of that waste, some of that particle is going to be lost in the flow and end up in the crevice of a rock work or in the filtration or something. And that mass, that piece of frozen mysis or frozen clam or even a formulated pellet, that can either rot and be consumed by bacteria, fungus, and all other things, and then release ammonia and all the byproducts that come with that metabolism, or it can be circumvented and completely intercepted by something like a hermit crab, which can consume the big meaty waste item and then break it down and then utilizing and trapping some of that waste in the hermit crab's tissues and enveloping it in the hermit crab, in the cleaner shrimp, in the peppermint shrimp, if you will, and then reducing that end waste product, which is then actually displayed and manifested in the water quality of your aquarium. So for this reason, hermit crabs and shrimp are very, very, very common for removing uneaten feed and all kinds of other big, larger sources of detritus in the aquarium. There are also pickers that we apply to the tank that target bigger pests. So emerald crabs are a fantastic example of this. They don't have small, delicate little claws like a peppermint shrimp or a hermit crab does. The emerald crab has large, meaty claws that, again, the same mechanical action. As it's picking through and trying to ascertain different food resources, it's moving, separating, creating new levels of oxygen, illuminating areas that were previously in darkness, and of course, consuming any big, meaty, uneaten prey items. Depending on their diet, where you source them, and how you treat them, emerald crabs can also be a highly efficacious biocontrol agent against bubble algae, which can be quite annoying and grow prolifically in a reef aquarium. So again, another good example of how that picking action can be used on a bigger, even more specific nuisance algae. Things like arrow crabs have also been used to some effect for strategically using their picking abilities, again, more specifically for things like worms, spaghetti worms, bristle worms in the tank, things that are more specific and using their specific abilities to be able to remove that pest issue. So now that we've talked about the various actions of the pickers, let's go down and we'll talk about the second major group, the grazers. Here we are. Now we're a little bit lower, closer to the rocks and the glass. So let's talk about the second major group, the grazers. And we're going to start inside a piece of live rock like you see here, and we'll be moving out in our grazing activity outside towards the glass and later out into the reef as a whole. So inside the live rock here, lots of schmutz building up in the live rock, lots of small uneaten feeds. It's a place where sediment is getting trapped. It's a place of minimalized flow. Yet there's also many capillaries and pores inside of live rock that attract and trap all of this detritus. Now, this can be very bad. Live rock is supposed to be a labyrinth, a huge metropolitan place of microbial activity, a lot of it dependent on oxygen and flow, exchange with the outside water column. So we want grazers, a mixture of grazers and pickers inside of the live rock itself to aerate, irrigate, and improve the minor and micro flow exchanging in our live rock and improve its activities. This is where we go into a mingling between the pickers and the grazers. This is where the copepods and the amphipods take into place. The things that like to live in the nooks and crannies where they have actual limbs to be able to pick at some things in the case of the amphipods, but they also, in the case of the copepods, transitioning towards things which are using their mouth predominantly to graze towards anything from loose, bacteria, clumps of algae, over towards detritus, and even active biofilms that are attached towards substrates. Once we get up there to a slightly larger size, we get to some other sustainably aquacultured cleanup crew members of the grazers, like the microbrittle stars, things that are living inside the live rock, essentially living pipe cleaners, scraping, consuming things that are both bigger, meatier prey items for their size, but also being able to scrape and graze, if you will, on the atmospheric level of biofilms, algae, cyanobacteria, fungi, archaea, and everything else that's building off that wonderful peanut butter layer of detritus lining all of that internal sections of the live rock. So as we transition outwards, we get away from the amphipods and the isopods, copepods, brittle stars, things of that persuasion, and we start to enter the illuminated zones of the aquarium that we really see and deal with. This is the glass work and the outer rock. This is the area where our other layer of grazers take into place. Snails dominate this category, and the hobby embraces dozens of different species from dozens of different climates and seas. So some classic examples we see here are some turbos that we see here from Mexico. We have trochus snails from the Indo-Pacific and astrias. So all of these snails have some collective features that make them highly desirable. They have the radula, a chameleon-like folding tongue filled with micro razor blades that they use to lap, lick, and scrape at that microscopic layer of growth that occurs well beyond the human eye can see it. Each of them have various different abilities to graze, consume, and process these various different algae, and that's a wonderful opportunity for a comparison video we'll be doing between the snails. But something we'll showcase right now is because we have different sizes of snails in our farm aquaria, for instance, we have multiple different radulas, multiple different gastrointestinal compositions, so that our snails are able to eat on different biofilms, they're able to graze on different biofilms, and able to digest different biofilms. So having diversity in your snail population is key. Something else which can also be followed up is things like the stomatella snail, which we are aquaculturing here on our farm, which can be produced in very high concentrations, and because they are being born on a large scale in captivity, there's a much higher chance that they are growing a level of plasticity for being able to absorb and specifically target the algae that they're being presented with commonly in the aquarium. So let's move up. The algae is getting bigger, uglier. It's harder for even a snail to deal with. Its radula has limited capacities to chew, to scrape, to dismantle higher levels of algae infrastructure. This is when the urchins come in, the diademas, the pincushions, the tuxedos. These, they come in with their Aristotle's lantern, and they are crushing and using their specialized mouth parts to scrape at all that higher level filth, higher level growing algae architecture. So we see here a higher level of grazers that we can employ to actually be removing both not only hairy, turf algae, bryopsis, fern-like growth, but even hard and crusting algae. So the urchins, another effective layer. As we move outside of the aquarium, we enter another regime of grazing pressure. This is when the tangs, the lawnmower blennies, the herbivorous fish come in. These are the high power artillery where they can move around, scope out, find areas of the tank just as they do in the wild, find areas in the tank of high concentration of algae and the like, and apply boom, 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 constant pressure. This is why sagonids, rabbitfish, and tangs are very popular choices in the reef aquarium. Things like lawnmower blennies that can act in the lower levels of the aquarium in between rock work, and then things like tangs that can hover and provide supremacy seemingly from all angles. So the grazers, absolutely imperative for being able to remove all the algae growth that can and will occur as a hallmark of a naturally growing and thriving reef aquarium. So let's move on.